So you mentioned your faith and you mentioned God saying, or maybe God giving you the assurance, like if you hold on to me, then you'll be okay. Like, was that what you experienced in New York? Like, or was it a little different than what you expected?
I mean, when I first moved to New York, I was caught up in the party scene and not caught up in the party scene. I was going out and going out to bars and drinking a lot and dating around, and I kind of had I kind of figured that would happen. Actually, now that I'm talking now, that was what I was afraid was going to happen. I was afraid that I would move to New York and then like lose myself because I'd be caught up in sin, and I kind of did. That kind of was what happened. But you know, eventually you wake up out of it because you're like, this isn't working. I'm not happier. Sometimes God just kind of smacks you around and then you wake up, I guess. I don't know.
Okay. So one day you just
So
woke
sorry
up.
to your question of did I hold on to it tightly? No. Like it was a gradual process. It was a gradual learning process.
Do you want to
Yeah.
explain that process a little bit? Because I also feel like I have a lot of friends. I don't know if they're going through that process, but I just know that I have a lot of friends who are not with the Lord anymore. I don't know, like what do you think that journey is like for someone who, once they get a taste of that, you know? Or what is that journey? Maybe it's just different for everyone.
I think if you're always holding on to God, I guess I take it back. I was always holding on to God. I was just also holding on to other things at the same time, but I was holding on to God. But if you're not holding on to God and then you kind of let go, like, yeah, maybe you do just drift away until one day, I don't know, something happens. But for me, I was always holding on to God, and I knew the things I was doing were not the things that He was approving of. It just took a while for like my heart to change to want the better things, and that process I cannot explain entirely, but it was just a maturation, and it was just getting to know God's love deeper. A lot of it was like. For a long time, I was just, and I still am now, of just like being very afraid that like I would not be okay. Like, when am I going to get married? How am I going to start a family? How's my life going to be okay? When am I going to get a job? Like, how are these things going to come together? So, in the past, those kind of fears, I would allow those fears to make me like basically self-medicate and numb myself because I was too afraid to face those fears. But then over time, I did therapy, I had life coaches, and it was a process of like, oh, okay, this is how you face your fears. This is how
Mm,
you face those demons, and then you face them, and then I don't know, a year or two later, they don't scare you as much. So then you're not numbing and medicating yourself, right? And so then you be kind of,
mm.
well, what does God say? He'll turn your heart of stone to like a real heart, or like a live heart. So.
Um, I don't mean to like get into the nitty gritty, but how does one face their fears? Like I remember I watched your video how I found love in New York, and I thought I got clickbaited, right? I was like, oh, this guy got a girlfriend. um, and then you were like, oh, I found Jesus, whatnot. And then but I remember in the video you were talking about
So
but I remember in the video you were talking about how you were just like I don't know, like learn to meditate. Is that like one of the things? Like how would you advise someone like it sounds abstract sometimes, like facing your fears. What does that look like?
it started with meditation, and just being aware of what I was feeling. Because in the very beginning of everything, after the breakup, I like wasn't even aware of like what I was feeling. I wasn't even aware that I was depressed or sad. Like I
Mm,
was just a lot of lack of awareness. So being present to the emotions, and then with like therapy, with journaling, I journal a lot. I have like in the videos where I have Google Docs, and journaling helps me process my emotions. So a lot of it's just like writing it out and going deeper and deeper. And
mm,
sometimes it's just like I'm so sad and
mm,
blah 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 blah. It's just expressing. I don't know, just expressing
mm,
oneself. And then it's not going to those coping mechanisms, because if you do those things, you don't. they numb your pain. If you don't feel your pain, you never get over it. And on the other side of pain is freedom, is truth. You just have to kind of sit with it. And then, but it takes practice, because in the beginning you're like, oh my God, this is like, I think I might die. But then over time you do it piece by piece, and you're like, okay, I'm actually not going to die. Okay, it's Friday night. I feel like depressed and lonely. You're like, okay, I survived, and it sucked for like 2 days, but I got out of it, and it was okay. And you do that enough, repeatedly, one day, it's not, like, you don't really, the pain is not as bad, and you don't need to like. But I'll say one time, there have been like spiritual little things that God has done as well. I remember like in an episode of this loneliness, depression, or whatever, one day I went to church, and already my heart was feeling heavy, and I was like, okay, whatever. And then like the first worship song played, and I was already starting to cry. And I was like, okay, this is not going to be good. And then like he did the sermon. I don't even remember what the sermon was about. And played the second, the wrap of worship. And then I was just like, I just bawled, just cried so much. And it was really embarrassing, because it was like during COVID. And so I had like, I was wearing a mask, but I was using the mask to cover my face because I was so embarrassed. And I was just like, the person next to me was like, dude, what is going on? But I remember, so going back to like how do you process? Like there are moments where you need to break down as well. And you, where you just like, your walls just get demolished. And that was, I don't know how you go seek those out. Maybe you go out into nature, maybe you find some sort of whatever. But for me, it was going to the church and then worship. And then I just remember it was in that moment that I was just like able to see how afraid I was, and be like, oh my God, I'm so afraid, God. Like, I am so scared. And then something about just me realizing that I was so scared and like crying it out. And I was like, oh, that's what it is. I'm just scared about this thing. Like the fear was just right there, and I didn't need to whatever. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It's all interesting stuff.
Well, thanks for sharing that process.